The ice winds of Kryos Prime carry two things: death and the screams of those who refuse to accept it. For Maya, a young alien widow clutching her dead husband's memory stone, both seemed inevitable. She had been surviving on borrowed time in a world that had already forgotten her name. But sometimes, when hope freezes solid and your heart beats its last rhythm, a stranger appears from nowhere to prove that even in the coldest corners of the universe, warmth can still find you. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Maya's breath formed crystal clouds in the thin air as she pressed her back against the ice-covered wall of an abandoned thermal station. Her violet skin had taken on a sickly pale shade, and her body trembled uncontrollably. The temperature on Kryos Prime had dropped another degree overnight, and without a heat crystal to power her thermal suit, she wouldn't survive until morning. 6 months had passed since the corporate enforcers from Thermal Corp had dragged her husband Vex away from their small apartment in the Frost Districts. They claimed he had stolen proprietary heating technology, but Maya knew the truth. Vex had discovered something in the old builder ruins, something that threatened the company's stranglehold on warmth itself. 3 days later, they delivered his memory stone to her door with a notice of eviction. No explanation, no apology, just the cold reality that her life as she knew it was over. The memory stone pulsed weakly in her frozen fingers, its blue glow the only light in the endless gray darkness of Icehaven City's outskirts. Inside the crystalline structure, Vex's final thoughts waited for her, but she couldn't bring herself to activate it. Not yet. Not while she still clung to the impossible hope that somehow she might find a way to survive without saying goodbye. Her stomach cramped with hunger. The last of her food had run out 2 days ago, and the water recycler in her thermal suit had finally given up that morning. Every breath sent sharp pains through her lungs as the sub-zero air invaded her failing life support systems. The suit's power indicator showed red, blinking slower with each passing hour. Maya forced herself to move, stumbling through the maze of frozen pipes and abandoned machinery that littered the industrial wasteland beyond the city proper. This was where the forgotten came to die, where Thermal Corp dumped their broken equipment and discarded workers. The company controlled every heated building, every warm meal, every breath of processed air in the thermal zones. If you couldn't pay their prices, you froze. A metallic clang echoed through the mechanical graveyard, followed by voices. Maya's heart seized as she recognized the harsh accent of ice runners, the brutal gangs that hunted the Frost Districts for anything valuable they could steal or sell. She ducked behind a massive heat exchanger, its surface covered in inch-thick frost. 3 figures emerged from the shadows between 2 collapsed storage tanks. Their thermal suits gleamed with fresh power cells, and heat vapors rose from their equipment like ghostly auras. The leader, a tall alien with scarred features, gestured toward Maya's hiding spot. "Sensor picked up a heat signature over here," he growled. "Weak one. Probably another frozen corpse, but check anyway. Sometimes they got good stuff before they die." Maya clutched the memory stone tighter. If they found her, they would take it. Her husband's final words, his last gift to her, would become just another item to trade for heat crystals. She couldn't let that happen. She wouldn't. The footsteps grew closer, crunching through the ice-crusted debris. Maya's suit finally gave its last warning beep and went silent. The heating elements shut down completely, and the brutal cold of Kryos Prime began its final assault on her body. Her vision blurred as hypothermia crept through her system. "Found something," called one of the ice runners. "Female, still breathing." Barely. The leader's boots appeared in Maya's limited field of vision. He knelt down, and she could smell the warmth radiating from his functioning thermal suit. It felt like torture. "Look at that," he said, reaching for the memory stone in her hand. "Pretty little crystal. This'll buy us a week in the warm zones. Maya tried to pull away, but her muscles had stopped responding. The ice runner's gloved hand closed around her wrist, prying her frozen fingers apart. The memory stone began to slip from her grasp, and with it, the last connection to the man she had loved more than her own life. "Please," she whispered, the word barely audible through her frost-covered lips. "It's all I have left of him." The ice runner laughed, a sound like breaking glass in the frigid air. "Had someone, did you? Well, he's gone now, and so are you. At least he'll keep us warm for a while." As the memory stone left her hand, Maya felt something inside her chest break apart. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Not her heart, though that had shattered months ago. Something deeper. The final thread that had kept her fighting, kept her moving through the endless cold and hunger and despair. Without Vex's memory stone, she truly was alone in the universe. The darkness crept in from the edges of her vision, and Maya closed her eyes, welcoming the end that had been stalking her for so long. The memory stone disappeared into the ice runner's thermal pouch, and with it, Maya's will to continue breathing. She lay motionless on the frozen ground, watching through half-closed eyes as the three figures rifled through her nearly empty pack. They found nothing else of value, just the broken water recycler and some empty food containers she had been too weak to discard. "Waste of time," muttered the second ice runner, kicking Maya's pack aside. "Girl's got nothing else worth taking." The leader stood up, adjusting his thermal suit's power settings. The heat emanating from his equipment felt like a distant sun against Maya's dying skin. "Leave her. The cold will finish the job soon enough." As their footsteps faded into the mechanical graveyard, Maya felt her body temperature dropping past the point of recovery. Her alien physiology, adapted for the temperate climate of her birth world, had never been designed for the brutal environment of Kryos Prime. Even with a functioning thermal suit, survival required constant vigilance and resources she no longer possessed. The frost began to form on her eyelashes, tiny crystals that caught what little light filtered through the perpetual gray clouds above. She tried to move her fingers, but they had gone completely numb. Her toes had lost feeling hours ago, and now the numbness was creeping up her legs like a slow-moving poison. Maya's thoughts drifted to her childhood on Verdania, where purple grass swayed in warm breezes, and the twin suns painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson. She remembered running through flowering meadows with Vex when they were both young, and foolish enough to believe that love could overcome any obstacle. They had planned to start a family, to build a small house near the crystal lakes where their children could grow up surrounded by beauty and safety. But Verdania had been strip-mined into a dead rock by the same corporations that now controlled Kryos Prime. The evacuation ships had scattered refugees across dozens of hostile worlds, and Maya and Vex had ended up here in this frozen wasteland, where hope came with a price tag most couldn't afford. The sound of approaching engines cut through her memories. Maya forced her eyes open to see a convoy of Thermal Corp vehicles moving slowly through the debris field, their searchlights sweeping across the abandoned equipment. Warmth Guards, the company's private security force, conducting their monthly sweep for unauthorized survivors. Maya knew what would happen if they found her. The Warmth Guards didn't arrest trespassers in the wasteland. They simply eliminated them as an example to others who might consider living outside the corporate thermal zones. Their weapons could flash freeze a body in seconds, turning flesh and bone into brittle ice that would shatter at the slightest touch. She tried to roll behind better cover, but her body refused to respond. The hypothermia had progressed too far, shutting down her motor functions one system at a time. All she could do was lie still and hope the shadows would hide her until the patrol passed. The lead vehicle stopped less than 50 meters away. A Warmth Guard in pristine white thermal armor stepped out, his rifle scanning the area with thermal imaging. The weapon's targeting system painted red laser dots across the frozen landscape, searching for any trace of body heat. Sector 7 shows minimal activity, the guard reported into his helmet com. Couple of scavenger teams earlier, but they've moved on. Area's clean. Maya held her breath, knowing that even the small amount of heat her dying body still generated might be enough to trigger the thermal sensors. The red dots swept closer, dancing across the ice-covered machinery around her hiding spot. Then something worse happened. The guard's targeting system locked onto something behind Maya, and she heard a familiar whimpering sound. A small creature, barely more than a pup, had been following her for the past few days. It was one of the ice wolves that sometimes scavenged in the wasteland, too young to survive on its own after its pack had been killed by Thermal Corp expansion. The little wolf had shared her shelter for 3 nights, curling up against her back for warmth. In her delirium, Maya had started talking to it, pretending it was the child she and Vex had never been able to have. She had shared her last scraps of food with the creature, even though she knew she was hastening her own death. Now the wolf pup was about to die because of her presence. Target acquired, the warmth guard announced, raising his weapon. Unauthorized. Life form in restricted zone. Maya watched in horror as the rifle's charging coils began to glow. The pup looked up at her with confused, trusting eyes, unaware of the danger. It had probably approached hoping for more food, or simply seeking the company of the only creature that had shown it kindness in this brutal world. The weapon fired with a sound like breaking thunder. The freeze ray struck the ice wolf directly, and the small creature's body went rigid before toppling over like a carved statue. Within seconds, the pup had become nothing more than a frozen sculpture, its life extinguished for the crime of existing in corporate territory. Something inside Maya shattered completely. Not just her heart, which had already endured more pain than she thought possible, but her very soul. The pup had been innocent, guilty of nothing more than following her in search of warmth and companionship. Its death was her fault, another life destroyed by her mere presence in a world that wanted her gone. The warmth guard climbed back into his vehicle, satisfied that the threat had been eliminated. The convoy moved on, leaving Maya alone with the frozen corpse of the only friend she had made since Vex's death. Maya closed her eyes and stopped fighting the cold. Her body had begun the final stages of shutdown, her heartbeat growing irregular as her core temperature dropped below sustainable levels. The numbness had spread to her chest now, and she could barely feel herself breathing. As consciousness started to fade, Maya's last coherent thought was a prayer to whatever gods might still listen. Not for her own salvation, which was impossible now, but for forgiveness. Forgiveness for failing to save Vex, for leading the wolf pup to its death, for being too weak to survive in a universe that devoured the gentle and innocent. The ice crystals in her blood began to form, and Maya surrendered to the darkness that had been calling her name since the day her husband died. The sound of footsteps crunching through frozen debris cut through Maya's fading consciousness like a blade through silk. Heavy boots, moving with purpose rather than the casual brutality of the ice runners or the mechanical precision of Thermal Corp patrols. These steps belonged to someone different, someone who moved through the wasteland like they understood its dangers, but refused to be intimidated by them. Maya forced her eyelids apart, though the simple act felt like lifting mountains. Through the haze of approaching hypothermia, she could make out a tall figure picking its way carefully through the maze of abandoned machinery. The person wore a thermal suit that had seen better days, patched and repaired so many times that it looked more like a quilt than proper protective gear. Steam rose from portable heat units attached to the figure's belt, creating a small cloud of warmth in the bitter air. The stranger stopped beside the frozen wolf pup, kneeling down to examine the small corpse. Maya could hear a muttered curse in a language she didn't recognize, followed by what sounded like words of respect for the dead. The voice was deep, unmistakably human, with an accent that spoke of worlds far from Kryos Prime. Humans were rare. In this sector of the galaxy, especially on corporate-controlled planets like Kryos Prime, most had been driven out during the resource wars, when the major corporations had decided that Earth's former colonies were too valuable to share with their original inhabitants. Those few humans who remained usually worked in the deepest, most dangerous parts of the mining operations, or had found ways to make themselves indispensable to the corporate machine. The humans stood and continued moving through the debris field, following some invisible trail that led directly toward Maya's hiding spot. As the figure drew closer, she could make out more details. Male, probably middle-aged, with graying hair visible through his suit's damaged helmet visor. His equipment was older but well-maintained, and he carried himself with the confidence of someone who had survived in hostile environments for a very long time. Maya tried to call out, but her vocal cords had frozen solid. The best she could manage was a weak gasp that barely disturbed the frost crystals forming around her mouth. The human's head turned toward the sound, and she could see his eyes scanning the area where she lay hidden behind the heat exchanger. "I know you're there," he said quietly, his voice carrying clearly through the thin air. Thermal readings show someone in hypothermic shock, probably minutes from cardiac arrest. "If you want to live, you need to trust me right now." Maya managed to shift slightly, just enough for her arm to become visible from behind her cover. The human immediately changed direction, moving toward her with renewed urgency. When he reached her position, he dropped to one knee and began a rapid assessment of her condition. "Bad," he muttered, pulling a portable scanner from his belt. "Core temperature 43 degrees and dropping. Pulse weak and irregular." "How long have you been out here without heat?" Maya tried to answer, but only managed to produce a faint whisper. The human leaned closer, his helmet almost touching her frost-covered lips. "Days," she managed to say. "They took everything." The human's expression hardened behind his visor. "Ice runners or corporate? Both." Without another word, the human began pulling emergency medical supplies from his pack. He activated a portable heat generator and placed it beside Maya, immediately surrounding her with a sphere of warm air that felt like paradise against her dying skin. Then he attached thermal patches to her arms and legs, devices that would slowly raise her core temperature without causing the shock that could stop her heart entirely. "My name is Jack," he said, working with practiced efficiency. "Former Thermal Corp engineer, current pain in their corporate backside. I've been tracking their patrols through this sector, documenting their elimination protocols for the resistance." Maya felt sensation beginning to return to her extremities as the heat patches did their work. The pain was excruciating, like thousands of needles stabbing into her flesh, but she welcomed it as a sign that she might actually survive. "Why help me?" she whispered. Jack paused in his work, looking directly into her eyes. "Because I've seen what they do to people like you. People who get in their way, who know too much, who simply exist in places the corporation wants to claim. I lost my own family to their policies, and I swore I'd never stand by and watch it happen again if I could prevent it." He pulled out a thermal blanket embedded with heating elements and wrapped it carefully around Maya's body. The warmth was almost overwhelming after so many hours of bitter cold, and she could feel her heart rate beginning to stabilize. "What's your name?" Jack asked as he continued his medical ministrations. "Maya. Well, Maya, you're going to live. But we need to get you somewhere safe where you can recover properly. These patches will keep you stable for now, but hypothermia this severe requires sustained treatment." Jack activated a communication device on his wrist, speaking in low tones to someone on the other end. Maya couldn't make out the words, but she caught references to extraction and medical support. Within minutes, she could hear the distant hum of an approaching vehicle, moving fast and staying low to avoid detection. "Friends of mine," Jack explained. "People who believe that warmth shouldn't come with a price tag, that survival shouldn't be a luxury only the wealthy can afford." A small transport craft materialized from behind a cluster of storage tanks, its engines muffled and its hull painted in the same gray tones as the surrounding debris. The pilot was another human, a woman with kind eyes and scarred hands who helped Jack carefully lift Maya into the craft's passenger compartment. The interior was fitted with a medical bay that would have impressed even the corporate facilities in the thermal zones. Jack connected Maya to monitoring equipment while the pilot, who introduced herself as Sarah, prepared an 4-drip of heated nutrient solution. "You're lucky Jack found you when he did," Sarah said as the transport lifted off, weaving between abandoned machinery to avoid patrol routes. "Another hour and we would have been recovering a body instead of saving a life." Maya felt tears forming in her eyes, the first emotional response she had been capable of since the ice runners had left her for dead. For months, she had lived in a world where kindness was extinct, where helping a stranger meant signing your own death warrant. Yet these humans had risked their lives to save someone they didn't even know, asking nothing in return. As the transport carried her away from the wasteland where she had expected to die, Maya clutched the spot where her husband's memory stone had rested against her chest. The crystal was gone, stolen by criminals who would trade it for temporary comfort. But perhaps, she thought as warmth slowly returned to her body, Vex's final gift to her wasn't meant to be his recorded words at all. Perhaps it was this moment, this unexpected rescue that proved that even in the coldest, most hostile corners of the universe, there were still people willing to risk everything for a stranger's life. The transport settled into a hidden landing bay carved deep into the ice cliffs beyond Icehaven City's reach. Maya watched through the medical bay's viewport as massive doors slid shut behind them, sealing out the bitter winds and corporate surveillance that had defined her existence for so many months. The hangar was larger than she had expected, housing several other vehicles and enough equipment to supply a small army. Jack helped her transfer from the transport to a mobility chair, her legs still too weak to support her weight after the severe hypothermia. As they moved through corridors hewn from living rock, Maya noticed the walls were lined with heating conduits that kept the air pleasantly warm without the oppressive humidity of corporate thermal zones. Everything here spoke of careful planning and patient construction, the work of people who understood that true safety required more than temporary shelter. "Welcome to Haven Station," Jack said as they entered a circular common area where dozens of people worked at various tasks. Home to about 200 souls who've decided that Thermal Corp's vision of the future doesn't include them. Maya stared in amazement at the bustling community around her. Families shared meals at long tables while children played games in alcoves, designed specifically for their safety. Engineers maintained equipment in workshops filled with salvage technology, while medical personnel tended to newcomers in a fully equipped clinic. Everyone wore thermal clothing, but the garments were clean and well maintained. Speaking of a community that had found ways to thrive rather than merely survive. A woman approached them, her silver hair braided with colorful ribbons that seemed wildly impractical for such a harsh world. She carried a steaming mug that smelled of spices Maya hadn't encountered since leaving Verdania. "This is Elena, our chief medical officer," Jack said. Former corporate surgeon until she discovered her employer was performing experimental procedures on unwilling subjects. Elena smiled warmly as she handed Maya the mug. "Herbal tea with nutrients your body needs to complete its recovery. The taste might seem strange at first, but I promise it will help." Maya accepted the offering with trembling hands, inhaling the complex aroma that somehow reminded her of home. The first sip sent warmth cascading through her chest, but more than the physical sensation was the simple kindness of being offered something made specifically for her comfort. "How did you find me?" Maya asked Jack as Alina began a gentle examination to assess her condition. Jack settled into a nearby chair, removing his damaged helmet and setting it aside. His face bore the weathered lines of someone who had spent years in hostile environments, but his eyes held a gentleness that corporate propaganda insisted didn't exist in human features. I was tracking that Thermal Corp patrol when my sensors picked up multiple heat signatures in the wasteland, he explained. The ice runners first, then you, then the patrol itself. When I saw what they did to that Wolf pup, I knew they had missed someone nearby who was probably in serious trouble. Elena finished her examination and made notes on a digital tablet. Severe hypothermia, dehydration, and malnutrition, but no permanent damage. With proper care, you should make a complete recovery within a week. A week? Maya couldn't hide her surprise. In the corporate medical facilities, treatment for conditions like hers typically took months and cost more than most people earned in a lifetime. We've had a lot of practice treating exposure victims, Alina said matter-of-factly. Thermal Corp's policies create a steady stream of people who need emergency intervention. Jack stood and gestured toward a corridor leading deeper into the station. Let me show you where you'll be staying while you recover. It's not luxurious, but it's warm and private. As they moved through the community, Maya noticed how people greeted Jack with genuine affection rather than the fearful deference she had grown accustomed to seeing in corporate territories. Children ran up to him with drawings and small gifts, while adults shared brief updates about their families or work projects. This was clearly a man who had earned respect through his actions rather than demanding it through authority. The quarters Jack showed her were simple but comfortable, consisting of a small bedroom, a washing facility, and a sitting area with a viewport that looked out over the ice fields below. Someone had already placed fresh thermal clothing on the bed, along with personal care items and a selection of books from various worlds. The clothes should fit, Jack said, checking the room's heating system. Sarah estimated your size during the flight. We keep a supply of different sizes because people arrive here under all kinds of circumstances. Maya ran her fingers over the soft fabric of the sleeping garments, marveling at their quality. On Kryos Prime, clothing was another commodity controlled by the corporations, priced to ensure that only the wealthy could afford comfort. Why do you do this? She asked quietly. Help strangers, I mean. You could live comfortably in the thermal zones with your engineering skills. Jack paused in his inspection of the heating controls, his expression growing distant. I had a family once. Wife and daughter. They died in what Thermal Corp called an industrial accident, but I knew better. My wife had been asking uncomfortable questions about the company's labor practices, and my daughter had witnessed something she shouldn't have seen. He turned to face Maya directly, and she could see old pain in his eyes that echoed her own grief. The official report blamed equipment failure, but I designed those systems myself. They don't fail the way the corporation claimed. After the funeral, I started asking my own questions, and suddenly I found myself transferred to progressively more dangerous assignments. Maya understood without him having to explain further. Corporate retaliation was subtle but devastating, destroying lives through bureaucratic weapons that left no obvious fingerprints. I escaped during a mining operation that went deliberately wrong, Jack continued. Found this place and the people who built it, refugees from a dozen different corporate injustices. We decided that if the corporations wanted to control survival itself, we'd create our own alternative. A soft chime sounded from Jack's communication device. He checked the message and smiled. Dinner will be ready soon. Nothing fancy, but we grow our own food in hydroponic gardens, so it's fresh and healthy. The thought of a proper meal made Maya's stomach clench with anticipation. She couldn't remember the last time she had eaten food that wasn't processed. Rations or scavenged scraps. Jack, she said as he prepared to leave. Thank you. Not just for saving my life, but for showing me that kindness still exists." He nodded quietly. "Rest now. Tomorrow, if you're feeling stronger, I'll show you more of what we've built here. And maybe you can tell me your story, help us understand what Thermal Corp is doing in the Frost districts these days." After he left, Maya settled into the most comfortable bed she had experienced in months, surrounded by warmth that didn't depend on corporate charity or criminal theft. For the first time since Vex's death, she fell asleep without fearing she might not wake up. Maya woke 3 days later to find Jack standing at her viewport, holding a familiar blue crystal in his palm. Her husband's memory stone caught the light from the heating elements, pulsing with the same gentle rhythm she remembered. "The ice runners made a mistake," Jack said, turning to face her. "They tried to sell this in the thermal zones, but our people have contacts everywhere. We bought it back." Maya's hands shook as she accepted the memory stone, feeling Vex's presence return to her life like warmth after endless cold. When she activated it, her husband's voice filled the room with words of love and hope, but also something more. Technical specifications, coordinates, the location of an ancient builder facility that could restore heat to all of Kryos Prime, breaking Thermal Corp's stranglehold forever. "He found the answer," Maya whispered, understanding flooding through her. "He found a way to save everyone," Jack nodded gravely. "That's why they killed him. And that's why they wanted you dead too, in case he had shared the information." Maya stood, her strength fully returned, and looked out at the ice fields where she had almost died alone. But she wasn't alone anymore. She had found family in the most unexpected place, people who had shown her that survival wasn't just about staying alive, but about choosing to fight for something greater than yourself. "Then we finish what he started," she said, clutching the memory stone close to her heart. "We bring warmth back to this world." Outside, the perpetual storms of Kryos Prime raged on, but inside Haven Station, hope burned brighter than any corporate heating system ever could. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.